Let's talk about the many uses of the micro glass weights. I originally created them for use with my fabric flip basket design to help weight down and cool the fabric during the fusion process. I soon discovered they have many uses. They make great fabric and pattern weights. By folding them in half from side to side, they can be molded to accommodate corners, different shapes, and of course straight lines. But what really surprised me is they also function as a quilter's or a tailor's clapper, only it's heavier and does a better job absorbing the steam and cooling down the fabric. So what is a quilter's clapper and why do you need one? A perfect seam press is a combination of heating and the cooling down of the fabric. If the fabric can be weighted down during the cooling process, you'll get a perfectly pressed flat seam. Now the wooden quilter's clapper is great, but it takes a little bit longer to cool down than the micro glass filled weights, and it requires light manual pressure. Now these are the same size, but the wooden clapper weighs 6 ounces and the cotton and micro glass weights weigh in at 10 ounces. Now these don't require manual pressure and they can be butted up together to use on longer seams. And if one side starts to feel a bit warm, you can always flip it over to the cool side and continue down your longer seams. Now I would recommend making 4 of these for the fabric flip baskets and for use as fabric weights, but you will need a minimum of 2 of these for the fabric flip baskets. Now you're going to find that the end results of the press seams are absolutely identical. The primary difference is one requires pressure and takes a little bit longer than the other one does, and this one does not require pressure and cools down faster. As promised, I'm sharing my fabric weight instructions. Now the instructions need to be followed very carefully. These need to be as flat as possible at the bottom, and we want to prevent the beads from escaping the pouch. Now the beads I use are micro fine, so they're like tiny round marbles. And because they don't have sharp edges, they won't erode the fabric over time. And they're also washable, unlike beans, rice, and other natural fillers. So when these are finished, they feel like soft sacks of flour. Now also, glass has a low thermoconductivity, so this means they pass heat slowly, so they're going to remain cooler for a longer period of time. So this is great for sewing projects where you need the fabric to cool down faster than normal. Now the most important reason for using glass is that they are a lot heavier by volume compared to other weight additives like poly pellets or rice, beans, and other natural fillers. So this is 1 pound of poly pellets, and this is 1 pound of microbeads. For this project, you'll need a good quality 100% cotton quilter's fabric. When I say good quality, this means that the stitching is close together. So you can hold your fabric up to the light and you'll be able to see how tightly woven the fabric is based on the amount of light that comes through the holes in the fabric. Good quality fabric is tightly woven. So this is one 12.5 by 9 cut of fabric. You'll need matching thread and 2 5-ounce bags of microfine glass beads. And I'll provide a link in the description box below to purchase these. We'll start by folding the fabric in half, wrong sides together, and press. Now we're creating 2 layers, and the 2 layers are used as an extra precaution to prevent the microbeads from slipping through the stitching. Now bring the raw edges down to the fold and finger press. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew 3/8 inch seam allowance across the short end and the long side using the default length settings on my machine. Now be sure and backstitch both start and stop. When I'm finished with that stitching, I'm going to come back through at 1/4 inch from the edge and use a zigzag stitch. And the zigzag stitch can be the default settings on your sewing machine as well, but you do want to make sure that your straight stitch and your zigzag stitch do not overlap. With the stitching completed, you can see there's about a 2 millimeter gap between the straight stitching and the zigzag stitch. So we're going to press the seam allowance to lock in the stitching. And normally you would trim this corner off, but we don't want to do that. That'll make this corner area susceptible to losing some of those micro beads. So let this cool off a little bit, and then I'm going to flip it inside out. Now I'm poking the corners out. You don't want to press too hard so that the stitching pulls apart. Now we're going to take the top and fold it in 1/2 inch from the top. Press. If you'd like, you can use Wonder Tape here to help close the top as an extra precaution. Now you don't want the glass beads getting into your sewing machine during this next step. So I've gone ahead and placed the tape on one side, but I haven't peeled the paper back yet. Now the beads come double bagged, so go ahead and open them and place them in a cup or a bowl to keep them from falling over for now. Now carefully pour the 2 glass bead packages into the bottom of the pouch. And you don't really need a funnel here because they're easy to pour out. Tap the first one down to the bottom. And this is a project where you don't want to add more than what is recommended. Now tap the beads to the bottom of the pouch. And we're going to place pins across the top line of the micro beads. Now this will help prevent them from spilling over while you sew. And if you've decided to use the Wonder Tape, you can go ahead and peel the paper back. And press the opening closed. Sew the opening closed at 3/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, but make sure and back stitch at both start and stop. And I wanted to show you that the pins do a really great job of keeping the beads from the end where you're sewing. So you don't absolutely have to have the Wonder Tape. I just like what Wonder Tape does in terms of holding my seams together while I'm sewing. So you can remove the pins. And I will shake these around and make sure that none of the beads are coming out anywhere. And it's perfect. So your finished size should be 8 by 2.5.